She had us. Both of us. Absolutely round her finger. Fundamentally, she achieved this through the way she looked at us. Shouldn't have been a surprise the way she moved her head to one side should leave me basically on my knees, or more akin, I should say, to a slightly tepid pool of just water. What was more surprising was the effect it had on him. Anything she wanted, he gave to her. Anything she demanded, he agreed to. And he agreed to everything with this same little smile on his face. The smile of a man who in actual fact was little more than 4 years old. I'm not saying I wouldn't have done the same, and more in his position, but it just seemed in some way more, downright surprising, coming from him. He wasn't that kind of man. He was a soldier. And when I say was, I mean he used to be. Between 1968 and 1984, he was a soldier in the British infantry. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel. He did 5 tours of Northern Ireland. And this was when, doing a tour of Northern Ireland was more than just a few games of pool and a chat with some kids outside a fish and chip shop. Some of the photographs he took. He had a Polaroid camera, and some of the things that, after he'd had a few drinks, he would get out of his box to show me. You wouldn't have thought they were of Northern Ireland. There was something about them that I just found in some way, surprising. He always refused to talk about South Georgia. Never mentioned it. I asked him about it one time, and his face turned within a matter of a few seconds, literally grey, slate grey. Even when he eventually retired from the army, he retrained as a maths teacher, for Christ's sake. I would have liked to have seen him teach. I can imagine the kind of teacher he was. I don't think he would have worn too many cords. I don't think he would have shared too many coffees with the sixth formers. Come and play with me. Read me a story. Can I sit on your lap? Where's Grandpops? There he is. Not his kind of scene, But he did it with her. The first thing I learned about photography, I learned when I was a kid. If you're taking a portrait photograph, if you possibly can, then take it from below the subject. It renders them, actually, oddly, what it does is it renders them not more heroic, not more godlike. Oddly, it renders them more human. And if you can take it in natural light, if you can capture the way the light falls at the start or at the end of a day especially, then it can be. He used to try to convince me that the existence of, the discovery of, and the understanding of the relevance and possible uses of the irrational number, which is commonly and internationally and historically known as pi, that is to 5 decimal places this number 3.14159, is irrevocable proof of the existence of God. It's just so illogical, he told us, that it could ever work, that it must just prove that there's something more than us, and it's so incredible that we can discover it. I think he's wrong. I told him. I think you're wrong. I told him. For someone so palpably intelligent, Arthur, sometimes you think like your head's full of wool. He liked me. He never got too cross. We talk about beer together. He never bothered about me coming from... He watched an unusual amount of tennis. Everything was tennis with him. His conversation was peppered with tennis metaphors. Sometimes I watch tennis with him. I never liked it much. Is it a terrible thing to say that sometimes the company of men is kind of in some way comforting? I don't mean it to sound, I don't mean anything other than he had a house in the eastern suburbs of Toulon, in a town called Cacaran, in the south of fucking France, for fuck's sake. When I go there with Helen for the first time, we drive in her car. She's a kind of mix between being a little bit embarrassed because, well, ostensibly at least at the time, we're kind of, socialists? And just being really fucking proud because her dad has a house in the south of France and she's taking me there and she's paying for the ferry because I'm skint. She keeps going on about how odd he is, but how she has a feeling she thinks I'll like him. And I do. She says that's one of the things she likes about me. I like people. People like me. They think I'm gentle. I had absolutely no idea people thought I was gentle. And she says she really likes this bit. This bit's one of the best bits of a man, she says. Which is a phrase that just about sends me completely insane with love for her and her nose and her smile and everything. Lucy was a cesarean, and when Helen was in labour, there was a moment when I thought that she could have died. And I'm a little bit embarrassed now because when I had to go into the toilet to get change into my what are they called? Scrubs, is it? When I had to change into my scrubs, I did have a bit of a cry. And when I did, I did ask God, who I don't fucking think is even there in the first place, to make sure that Helen was all right. I said, we can survive if we lose the baby, but I don't think I could make it if she went and died on me. It's like talking to a photograph or the mirror. It has the same effect. Which isn't to discount it completely, but it's not God. The second time I go to his house, after me going out now for 2 years, he takes me diving. He's become a big fan of scuba diving the 18 months that me and Helen have been going out, which is maybe a surprising character development for a man in his age, but he's a surprising man. Between Saint-Tropez and the Ile-de-Porquerolles, there are, he says, actual shipwrecks that you can actually dive on. Would I like to come? I've never worn a wetsuit before, and it takes me longer to get into than I hoped, and it makes me feel a bit fat. He tells me he's going to take me to the seawall. I ask him, the what? He says, the seawall. This makes no sense to me at all. There's a wall in the sea. It drops down hundreds of feet. I had no idea the bed of the sea was built like that. I thought it was a gradual slope. He brought us these little bags with bits of bread in. You hold them upside down to swim with so you don't lose the bread because it naturally floats upwards. And he takes us to the wall. And swimming there with the sun, as bright as it is above us, and it is a bright day, even then, the darkness of the fall that the wall and the sea reveals is as terrifying as anything I've seen. You get back to the surface, of course, and the idea that there never was a seawall down in the first place is a bit embarrassing, frankly. I mean, what did I actually think the seabed was made of? When Helen's giving birth to Lucy, the midwife calls to me. Daddy, do you want to see your baby born? They've built a little tent. I look over the edge of the tent and I'm one of those people who I never know where to look when people point things out to me. Like, I'm a kid and I'm driving along and Mum says, look, a kestrel, or look, a plane. And I don't have the faintest idea what to look at. I just smile and nod dumbly and say, oh yeah. But I'm completely lying. And this is a bit like that. Mainly, I see the yellow of the inside of a stomach. Once you've seen the inside of somebody's stomach, I think your relationship with that person probably then moves to what? A new level? I love her. Completely. With every bone and bit of skin of me. And it's been very rare the times in our relationship when she's cried and I've comforted her. I'm fucking crying all the fucking time. I can't watch an episode of ER without just being a wreck. I cry at ground force when the person comes back and they've had their garden done up as a surprise. We go there to his house for our holidays every year. We used to drive 2 years straight. We drove all the way down from London without stopping. We took it in turns driving. We kind of promised to share navigating, but neither of us needed any help. We did it fine. When Lucy was born, we started flying there, though, because, well, driving's not fair on a baby, and he would buy us the tickets. You can get flights to Carcassonne for dead cheap, but he would pay for us to fly into Nice, and he would hire us a car when we got there. The first time he sees her, he takes her by surprise a bit. He looms over from behind her, and he's wearing these glasses, these big, old glasses. And he's a very, very tall man. And he takes her by surprise, and she screams like living shit. Believe me. It took her about 3 weeks to recover from that. But she did. And then she'd start with shuffling across the floor to reach him and putting her hands up and making these little noises that basically mean, "Put me on your lap and read me a story now, you funny old fucker. I don't care if you're meant to be weird. I don't care if you're meant to be scary. I don't care what anybody fucking thinks about you. I want a story, and I want it now." Who could resist that? She starts wearing cardigans, and that's me done for. One time I say to him, if there's a God, is he a man? And the question catches him by surprise a bit, but after a while he says that yes, he thinks in the end God is probably a man. So I say, well, what does he look like? Does he have a beard? Does he wear robes? Does he have long white hair? He says to me that the thing about God is that whatever I think he looks like, well, then he will look the absolute opposite to that. And whatever I think he is least likely to look like, then that is what he will look like. So I ask him if he means God looks a bit like Gary Glitter. And he tells me not to be so bloody silly. So I say to him, if you can't tell me what he looks like, and you don't know what he looks like, and he doesn't look like anything, then how do you know he's anything more than just an idea? Just something you made up? She's 8. We've been going every year. We've talked for years about having a second child, but every time we talk about it, we think about Lucy, and we just think, you know what? We're very happy. We just want her. She's clever, she's funny, she's very, very pretty. She's Helen's sidekick. She's my sweetheart. They make little wisecracks about me. The two of them stand there, sizing me up. But I know if they push it too far, she'll come running over to me and put her arms around me, because the idea of making me properly sad makes her feel a sick. In the 8 years that she's been born, I've fucked a lot of things up. And somehow, by the skin of my teeth, managed to largely come out unscathed. And me and Helen, we're doing okay. We have little routines and stuff, like about the dishwasher, or the shopping, or cooking, because I really like to cook for her, but compared to her, I am shit at it. So when she cooks, it's properly a treat. We have all these routines, but it's like we fucking love them. Rather than finding them, what, restricting? Sometimes when you swim in the sea, the force of the waves can crash right against you. It can knock you over. There have been times when, just trying to get out of the sea, I've been knocked over. 2 summers ago this happened, and I cracked my coccyx against a stone on the shore's edge, and I flailed about like some kind of huge seal. I was, at that moment, the mathematical polar opposite of Daniel Craig. And it doesn't get like this normally where he is. Normally the sea's warm there, which is quite an unusual feeling for me. I always swim out as far as I think is safe, and then turn and swim another 10 strokes, and then stop, and then swim back. Sometimes you think the tide's caught you. You panic because you think you're not moving. You are. You just need to turn on your back. Collect your breathing. Kick slowly. You're moving. I ask him, where is he? He says, who? I say, God. Where is he? Is he in the sky? That's where people used to think he was. Children and medieval people. Is he on the edge of our solar system? Is he on the edge of our galaxy? Because every time we think we've located where he must be, then we find out something else and we realize that God can't be there. Is he 15 billion light years away? On the very edge of the universe? In the parts of the universe that take on the form of the time of the Big Bang, that have that kind of density? Is he there? Is that where he is? He says, we don't know everything, Alex. There are some things we don't know. There are things we can't explain. And I tell him, now? He says, what? I say, we can't explain them now. But that doesn't mean that they have no reason. It just illustrates the gaps in our knowledge. It doesn't mean that we won't be able to explain them one day, because I think we will. I want to acknowledge something. And it's embarrassing because I know it's something that you will have noticed. There's a hole running through the center of my stomach. You must have all felt a bit awkward because you can probably see it, even in this light. Mostly people choose not to talk about it. Some people say that they're sorry, but that, yes, they can see my hole. What's that, Alex? They say. You appear to have a great big hole running right through the middle of you. I started doing okay, you know. It sounds stupid, but I got a contract with British Home Stores. I took the photographs for their catalogues and for their websites. The menswear, the women's wear, the back to school stuff, the homeware. I made so much money taking photographs of cushions and saucepans and digital alarm clocks, I can barely believe it myself. 5 weeks ago, just before we go, just before all the packing and the frantic stuff about what are we going to take, Helen's buying some stuff to take with us. She's got Lucy all of her new stuff, her dresses and the cozy and her books and toys for the flight. And she got me some shades, which were properly pucker, seriously. Very Poncherello from Chips. She asked me to come into the bedroom because there's something she wants to show me. And I get there and she's wearing this dress. It's a blue dress with this dropped back. She asked me to tell her what I think. I swear for about 30 seconds I couldn't speak. She looked. Oh, and the idea that I was married to her and that we had our girl and that this was our life. There's a man in the market in Port Grimmo that we visited on our second day, and he sells us a case of claret for the equivalent of about 15 quid. And it is like heaven. We drink 2 bottles on our second night there. The next day, Helen has to go to the supermarket because we need some bread and some milk, and we need some shampoo for Lucy, and I need some athlete's foot cream. And we love, they've got these little yogurts, these little pots of vanilla flavored yogurt that you can't get in Britain. And she wants to get some cheese. It's fun getting it from the market, but as it goes, it's a proper rip-off. So she wants to go to the supermarket, which is where most of the French people go anyway. So me and Arthur go down with Lucy, down to the sea. There's a bay just near his house, and round the corner from the bay there is a little cove that you can climb onto. And when the bay's busy, you can go to this cove, which is actually nearer his house and more secluded, and it's very quiet and it's lovely, and we talk about it and we decide to go there. She can go into this world. Did you ever know anyone like that? Any kids like that? When she thinks nobody's looking, she can start off just going further and further into her imagination, playing games all by herself. Actually, what she's really doing is she's talking to herself, which some people might find a bit disconcerting, but I just love to watch her. One time he says to me, he looks at me and he says, he's in the feeling of water. Sometimes there's the shape of the roll of the land. He's in the way some people move. He's in the light falling over the city at the start of an evening. He's in the space between 2 numbers. You know what the cruelest thing I ever did to anybody was? I'll tell you. I've started getting into detective fiction. I have a friend who works at St. Mary's University, and he said to me, "Alex, all fiction is detective fiction." He's completely wrong. Jane Austen isn't detective fiction. Franz Kafka isn't detective fiction. Bridget Jones isn't detective fiction. Detective fiction is detective fiction. James Elroy. Arthur goes for a swim. I'm reading L.A. Noire, the bit where the cop and the killer in the deserted car park meeting at midnight with the lights out, neither knowing whether the other is there. Lucy's kind of being a Power Ranger. The sun is gorgeous. I've got my shades on, it's so bright. Arthur comes back. The water's amazing, he says. He dries off. I notice his feet. The skin on his feet is unusually battered and cracked. It's one of those moments you kind of rumble that he's a little bit old. Tells me I can go for a swim. I do. And the water is amazing. I way past the first bank. I get past all the seaweed and I swim out and out and out. Around the bay. And the light. At that time of day, light on the Mediterranean is... And the sea is warm. I turn around. I'm about 20 yards out. The sky is this huge blue curve. I can see the houses on the top of the hill. I can see his house. I can see the swimmers around the corner of the bay. And I can see Arthur sitting, reading. He's reading some history of China. He's really into it. His towel draped around his legs, water dripping onto his book. I can see all that from here, with real detail. I can see Lucy running about a bit behind him, playing Power Rangers. I can watch them as she does a little bit of a jump. It's odd because he's so into his book that he doesn't notice that she loses her footing on the sand and the gravel of the rock, and she slips and stumbles. And she's quite close to a little edge of one of the rocks there, and what she does is she tries to correct her balance, but in trying to correct the balance of her weight, she actually puts more weight on her back foot, which slips out from underneath her. And it's weird to look at, because she does fall off the edge of this 6-foot high cliff on the rocks, and she falls backwards and cracks her head against some stones which are jutting out at the bottom of the cliff. I can see it all clearly, but I can't really hear anything. And it's weird watching it with no sound. Like, if the sound's off on the telly, it's always a bit strange. It takes a while to register before I turn and swim back to the shore. I'm not thinking, so I start swimming faster and faster, which is stupid because I'm panicking. And when you panic, you can't breathe properly, so I have to tell myself, concentrate on your breathing. I can kind of watch him between strokes. He's thrown down his book and jumped off the cliff, and there's one other couple there that I didn't notice before who have stopped their sunbathing and run towards where she is. I notice him pick her up. He's torn between running back to the house to call an ambulance and waiting for me. I get there in enough time for him not to have to worry about this for too long. I go to her. I take her from him. And what there is this, there's a handful of blood in her hair. It's thick and matted, and her hair's all chewed up by it. I read it's a process, and it's never absolutely instantaneous. The injury causes the death of brain cells, so signals are no longer sent to the lungs. Bit by bit, the machine closes down. Her blood sticks to my hands. I carry her up the path of the cove, and I haven't bothered getting dried off, and people are looking at me, stopping still in their tracks and talking to me in French, and I'm aware that I'm kind of not crying. I look like... fuck. I don't know. I go back into the house with her, and as I'm getting through the sliding glass doors, I bang her head against the wall. And I'm talking to her, which is stupid. And I say to her, I tell her, I'm sorry for hitting her head against the wall. But there's part of me that's thinking, well, fuck it now. What does it fucking matter now? I may as well drag her by a fucking ankle, this bit of meat and air. I remember I was quite astonished because one of the ambulance men spoke good English, quite good English. He lived in Southampton. I couldn't help but thinking, why the fuck did you live in Southampton of all places? The sound of her closing the door with her bags full of yogurt and shampoo and cheese and bread takes me completely by surprise. She looks at me from across his house. She's wearing sunglasses to protect her against the light. He's sitting on his sofa. He's still wrapped in his towel. He is a man that is completely broken. He's a shattered form. The little noises that he makes. I lean over the desk at the check-in at Nice, and we'd actually been taken to the front of the queue and we'd been given an upgrade. And while the woman there was sorting all this out, I look over her, and at the sheet she's checking off on her desk, and there's a list of the passengers and the crew and the baggage, and at the very end of the list it reads, human remains, which was a bit. We're sitting, the three of us, in the departure lounge. We can't really touch one another. We can't really look at each other or at anybody else. I look at him, and this is the cruelest thing I ever did to anybody else. And don't forget, this is a man that I've known him for 10 years, and I love him. I look at him. I say to him, you get back to London and the noise of the place and the dirt and the colour and the roar of it, I can't actually What I can't really do for now, at least, is work. There's a lie at the heart of photography that I've always cherished. When you take a photograph, what you do is you freeze something that's actually alive. To do this properly, you need, more than anything, to believe in life. There's a kid outside the window laughing. And in his laugh there is absolutely no joy or humor. Warning, this vehicle is reversing. I have a complete and total inability to cry. You see people when they say to you that they can't possibly imagine not believing in anything because it would be just too unbearable. I think there's something sick about that. The level of cowardice in that is just, it's unbearable to me. I've been home for 3 weeks. If this can happen, anything can happen. Just now, there was a couple in the street and they were arguing. And it looked like they were deliberately trying to copy characters out of soap operas in the way that they argued. As though the closest they'll ever get to being famous was having a row in the street like they're actually on EastEnders. The misery and the emptiness and the vacuous fucking shitness of their lives is so considerable that the proximity to the behavior of soap characters acts as some kind of consolation. I am falling absolutely inside myself. I am holding my entire head together. The skin and the shell of me. And you can see that. You can see that in my just because we don't know doesn't mean that we won't know. We just don't know yet. But I think one day we will. I think we will.